That's good. All right, here we go.
Okay.
All right, we're live. Hey, everybody. How y'all doing today? Josh Null here again, Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. My hair is a little less frazzled than yesterday when we did this later in the afternoon. So apologize for yesterday's video. Got home and reviewed it and I thought, wow, I look like I had a long day. I'm joined by Chris Roper. He is a retirement plan success coordinator with Qualified Plan Advisors out of Kansas City. I'm coming to you from Fairhope, Alabama, actually in my office. I'm the only one here. The affiliation for Chris and I, we both have we are affiliated with an independent RIA called Prime Capital Investment Advisors. They're also based in Kansas City. Chris and I also, Prime takes a team approach when it comes to 401k planning and many other things. So Chris and I work together in a team environment on some of the things that I have going along here on the Gulf Coast. So some of you that are coming on here that are clients of mine may recognize his name. I'm going to read a quick disclosure real quick. Advisory services offered through Prime Capital Investment Advisors, PCIA, a federally registered investment advisor. The following commentary and responses are the opinions of me, Josh Null, and Chris Roper, and are not necessarily the opinions of PCIA. They are for informational and educational purposes only, and they are not and should not be considered investment advice. Past performance is no guarantee of future results, and no guarantees expressed or implied. Lastly, PCIA is not in the business of offering tax advice. So that all said, Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on again today.
Yeah. Are you in your office now again?
No, I'm
Home
broadcasting from downtown Kansas City in my loft. So
very nice. I heard y'all been raining for like 2 straight weeks.
It's been kind of nasty out there. Yesterday turned out nice. Had the new world. We're having happy hours with friends on via technology now. So it was a friend's birthday last night, and we had 15 people on a webinar and cheers to each other and said happy birthday. So
I've got some buddies that would pour their beer on their computer accidentally in that regard.
Yeah.
Hey, well, let's lay out the 3 things that we're going to talk about. One, if you don't mind giving just kind of a market update. 2, I'm going to dive into a little bit of the details of the stimulus package. And then lastly, we're going to talk about 401ks, 403bs, qualified retirement plans, specifically sequence of return risk, and also a little bit of detail on some do's and don'ts right now if you're looking at transferring or rolling over your 401k. So I'll go ahead and toss it over to you. What are we seeing out there? Yeah,
so it's been a pretty interesting, last 4 weeks, and this week is no different. The market's up again today. We're at right now, right before we started this, we were up about 20% in the last 3 days. So crazy downs, crazy ups. It's all over the place. We don't want people to get too excited. There's a lot more bad news to come with the, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but just there's going to be a lot more infections coming out. We haven't hit peak infection yet to where it's starting to go down. There's going to be layoffs. So there's going to be some more bad news. We expect to see there more ups and downs in the market. But it's sure nicer to see the market going up than in those 1,000, 2,000 point down days. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I just want to make sure we don't get too excited on the way up. Don't get too excited on the way down, because there's a lot more volatility to come.
Yeah, I think whenever you see the word historical, both up and down, being tossed around every other day, that can be a little alarming. So, I think what the other day we had our greatest historical one-day return since 1933, right?
Yep.
And that was not that many days after having our greatest downturn since 1987.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Chris, you're a young guy. If you want to feel really old, when someone mentions 1987 like it was ancient history, and you were in junior high during that time period, you're like, come on, man, it wasn't that long.
You're younger than I thought. I thought you were in college then, so you're good. You're good.
Ouch. Well, like we talked yesterday, I've got I'm a Gen Xer with the mind of a millennial and the body of a boomer. So
there you go.
I've got 3 generations covered. I'm gonna go over a few of the details that were released by one of our local congressmen, Bradley Byrne. He's a pretty well-known figure in our area. First, on the coronavirus, I just want to briefly say what he released. It says 418,000 Americans tested, 69,000 were positive. Almost half of those were in New York. And it's a 16% positive rate. I think what we're seeing, to make this relevant to the Gulf Coast, I think New York is obviously the hot spot. My understanding of LA is not doing great. And then probably what is of greatest concern to us down here along the Gulf Coast is Louisiana, specifically New Orleans. I don't know if you're paying attention to New Orleans up there in Kansas City, but it's not looking good as far as the news coming out of there, which kind of makes sense because this virus came on the heels of Mardi Gras. And if anybody's ever been to New Orleans around Mardi Gras time or any random weekend, it's pretty jam-packed, right? So not surprised there. The package total, I think they landed on 2.2 trillion. That's not in this information, but it looks like about 367 billion is allocated to small business. They consider small business someone that has 500 employees or less. That's a very high percentage of the overall companies in America, but really the highest percentage is going to be 20 or less. They're going to have some restrictions on people getting businesses getting those and how they have to hire back. They allocate another 600 billion to individuals. That would be 1,200 per individual, up to making up to 75,000, and 500 per child. They've got some other details here. I'm not going to go into every detail. It looks like the restaurant industry kind of got a double-edged sword on this. I don't know if you saw that, but I think most servers, because of tips, don't actually make federally mandated minimum wage. And Chris, you have background in the restaurant industry. I don't, but it looks like, at least of right now, with the information I had, that if they have to hire, if they get help, they have to hire the employees back, but they got to pay them minimum wage. So that may be a little, that sounds great, but that may be a little problematic for a restaurant's business plan. Do you have any specific dealings with that from your past?
I haven't seen that information, so I haven't really dug into it and seen that. But just I used to operate restaurants for years, and having that, that's definitely going to be a challenge for restaurants, because they're probably going to need to take the money, which means that they're going to be under that proviso to do the minimum wage. And it'll be an interesting challenge for restaurant managers and operators to figure out how that's going to affect the bottom line and their ability to provide the service to their customers. So I'd imagine, just off the top of my head, not really looking into this or knowing it, but my background in it, that if restaurants take money and they end up having to pay servers minimum wage, they're going to end up passing that cost along to the customer with increased prices.
Right. All right. So that's kind of a general market update. I don't think there's the stimulus, that's kind of breaking news, but I think on the market, we've all been strapped into this roller coaster now for the last couple of weeks. So I don't think anything we said there really shocked anybody. Yeah. The only thing I will say, and not like you said earlier, not to be a Debbie Downer, but we have more bad news ahead. So 2.2 trillion, that's a big T. That's a lot of money, but this company operates on such a massive amount of capital flow that's really, I think, by all intents and purposes, is intended to be, as crazy as it sounds, intended to be a little bit of a Band-Aid to get us through to when we're back to being productive again. Yep. So, I guess if I gave any piece of advice, would be just stay buckled in, as far as, this is not going to be the end all be all cure all of correcting what we've been dealing with the last couple of weeks. So, Chris, I want to segue now to something that we started talking about yesterday. And background for some of you all that are watching this that are not as familiar with Chris Roper as his network would be with him. Chris serves in a pretty high level capacity for helping a variety of qualified plan accounts all across the United States. Does a lot of educational services. Chris, I'm not going to guess how many millions of dollars or how many clients you have, but I know it's substantial. And I think, in your network and in your client base, people really turn to you for providing guidance and information. So with that teed off like that, what do you think? You and I wanted to talk about sequence of return risk. We can start there, or wherever you'd like to start as it relates to qualified plans.
Yeah, I think sequence of return risk is a good place to start. And just to give you everybody a little more background about my background is that, yeah, you're right. I have about, between all my qualified plans before this crisis was around 500, a little over $500 million in my qualified plans, and probably somewhere 10, 15,000 participants across the country that I work with. And I've been doing this for years. So I'm trying to bring to you and to your listeners, to the people that we're talking to, is the information that I bring to regular people across the country when they ask me questions, uh, either stuff that they know about, or realistically today, what we're talking about, sequence of return risk, is the risk that really nobody knows about and nobody's talking about. Everybody knows about market risk and market going up, the market going down, but they don't really understand how sequence of return, and we'll break that down in a second, how that really impacts them and impacts their lives. So to jump in, the easiest way to think about this is it's the order in which you get your return. So some years the market's up. Actually, most years the markets are up. If you look back since 1980, 30 out of the last 40 years, the S&P has been positive. If you take out the 0%, the down 1, the down 2, you're really looking at 33 of the last 40 years. So the overwhelming majority of the time, the market's up. But what happens when the market's down? And specifically to those people who are close to retirement or just started retirement, that's what we're really going to talk about, sequence of return risk today. Because the people who, you and me, Josh, we're saving money, we're saving for retirement. It doesn't matter if the market goes up and down. In fact, it's actually better when the market goes up and down because we can buy low, the dollar cost averaging. But those people, when you get about 5 years out from retirement and your first 5 years in retirement, it's really crucial to make sure your portfolios are set up to weather downturns like this right now, because of what it does to your portfolio, not today, but what it does down the road. And it's going to be a little hard. I don't have an electronic copy of this, but I want to show you. This is just some information that BlackRock put out just to kind of help you with the understanding of what you're looking at here and thinking about. And what they do is there's going to be 3 different lines that we're going to look at. Okay. And all of them represent an overall 7% rate of return. It's the number they used. So one of them is going to say, hey, we started out and we did good in the first few years of retirement and it started out positive. The other line is going to say we got 7% rate of return the entirety of our retirement, which we know is not realistic. The market doesn't do 7% a year. On average, it might do that, but not every single year does it do that. And unfortunately, that's how all the technology that you're looking at, if you're looking at your record keeper technology, or most advisors that are showing you things, they're showing you just an exact 7% rate of return the whole time, which is not realistic. And then the last line we're going to look at is the exact same returns that we had in the very first one, except for they just reverse the order of them. So you're going to start out having a bad first couple of years, but it's the exact same numbers, every single thing. They just reverse them. So I'm going to show you this right now.
It's all about what was the market doing in the year that you retired?
Exactly. And it's not, can you see this okay? Or
just a little.
How's the lighting look?
Lighting's fine. You got a little glare on it, but I think the gist of it is come to us a little bit.
Okay. So if you can point out, the very top line should be a purple line if I'm looking at it right. Yeah. So the top line is the purple line, and it's showing you starting out in positive returns. And then when you end up with money by the time you pass away. Okay. The middle line, this blue line, is 7% every single time. You still end up with money. You're okay. And what it's showing you here is when you reverse the order of the returns, you start with a bad year. This bottom line, which is a dark blue, you end up running out of money. Okay. So the whole point of showing this and talking through this is you need to be able to, and I tell people there's no rule that you look in a textbook and read, but I tell people 5 years before you're going to retire, whatever number that is, you really need to be thinking about having a strategy, changing how you're investing from accumulation to decumulation, or from saving and growing your nest egg to how do we going to convert that to a strategy to spin that down. And you invest differently when you're doing those 2 different things. So there's 2 different goals to have. You're investing differently, and you just start thinking about that. And the reason I say 5 years out is because from the top of the market to the bottom of the market, or say they call peak to trough, back to even from 08 took 5 years for the market to do. So that's why I tell people, hey, when you're 5 years out, so if you're 5 years out and you're listening to this, or you're getting close to that, or you have parents that are 5 years out and you're listening to this, they really need to be thinking about, okay, how do I need to be starting to change how I'm investing to make sure that I can minimize this risk. And it also is in the first 5 years of retirement. So when you're talking about retirement income planning, having an income plan in place on how you're going to draw this money down, those are the things that we do on a daily basis. Josh does, I do, really good advisors will do. And you want to make sure you understand this risk. And then if you understand the risk, then you can mitigate it. And there's a lot of different ways to mitigate. And when I say mitigate, I just mean to reduce that level of risk of something bad happening to you. And basically you running out of money 5, 10, 15 years earlier because you didn't have this risk mitigated. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's different strategies, and the different strategies work for different people. That's part of what you get when you're working with somebody like Josh or myself, is the knowledge of how to mitigate these risks and which strategies to use that are best for you. Because not every strategy is right for every person. And I'd love, Josh, I'd love to hear your thoughts on sequence of return risk, on the ways you mitigate, on different things like that, on what people should be thinking about.
What I'd like to do is quote one of the owners of Prime Capital Investment Advisors, Tim Hakes, and I'm gonna misquote him a little bit because I don't remember how he always says it, but he says it often. You know, he says it's not necessarily the pile of money you have coming into retirement that is important, but he said what's more important is what is the income that you can produce off of that pile of money and for how long, right? Because, you know, with my advanced age here, Chris, as you get a little older, you view things a little different. And, you know, Americans historically, if you go back, you know, a couple generations, were designed to retire in their mid 60s and drop dead a couple of years later, right? So the load on pensions and the load on any retirement plans was not as great. I always use my grandma and grandpa as an example, and I do this with utmost respect, and may they rest in peace. But when my grandpa retired in his mid 60s from being a welder for many years, I mean, he was pretty beat up, man. And while he did live a number of years, I mean, I know I was a kid, but they were old. I mean, they were gray headed and stooped. And I mean, they showed every year of their age. Well, fast forward one generation to my mom, who is now 66 years old. Sorry, Mom. And she runs marathons. And man, I'm telling you right now, there ain't no telling how long she's going to live. Now, for my mom, who is a retired teacher from her first occupation and now is still working as a consultant for a local or regional university, she'll have 2 retirements. So put that situation to the side. Most people don't have that coming into retirement. What they have more often than not is whatever they have put into a defined contribution plan, where they control the amount of money put into it, but they don't necessarily control the amount of money coming out of it, versus my mom, who has defined benefit. So I think the thing, to sum it up without getting too far in the weeds, is if you're coming into the landing strip of your accumulation years in a defined contribution plan, a 401k, a 403b, a 457, an IRA, whatever it is, where you control the amount of money going in, but you don't necessarily have a set number of what is going to come out of that in an income stream, I think that's the time when it would behoove you to maybe look for some professional advice. Not necessarily just me, not necessarily just Chris, just someone that you trust that knows how to do income planning over a long number of years, with the fact, like what the chart that Chris showed you. I don't know the exact number on there, Chris, but on the one where the market was down when they retired and they ran out of money, that number they ran out of money at was probably sometime in the early 80s. They're 82, 83. Is that a good guess?
Yeah, it was the mid 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, man, people are living to 90s and 100s now, right?
Yep. And so, I think that would be a great topic, really, for our next call tomorrow. I think, so we don't get too long today. Right. I was thinking exactly. I think we should talk about longevity risk and how that plays into retirement income planning on our next call. The last thing I wanted to say on that, I didn't actually read you the numbers. The numbers will blow you away if you look at this chart that I was showing. Is the first 2 years that we're down for the person who runs out of money. Take a guess on how far down the market was. Just take a guess on this.
Oh, in that chart?
Yeah.
Probably down 6 to 10%.
Yeah, it was down 7% in year 1, 4% in year 2. And that's what blows people's minds, is they don't really understand how just little amounts of money that go down, you can never recover because you're pulling money out. So
Do you
it's
have a chart
really,
that shows you what it was like when it was down 20% the year you retired?
yeah, I can't imagine how many years off you would be off
That'd be
that
an
one.
ugly
So
chart. Some of the things people dealt with 08 and some of the things people are dealing with now. So, well, Chris, we had one more topic, but I think I'm going to save that for the next video so we don't go long here. And that was going to be kind of some fundamental practical things for people looking at transferring or rolling over 401ks and retirement accounts. We can tackle it now, or we can save that for the next one. Your call.
I think we save for next one. I think we just tell people that you need to be really cautious about rolling money over right now and be really thoughtful about it. So if that's something that's going on in your mind, make sure you either reach out to Josh and ask him about it, or wait for our next video. We can talk about that then.
Yep, I think that's perfect. Well said. All right. So again, Josh Null with Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. This is Chris Roper. He's with Qualified Plan Advisors. We are both affiliated with Prime Capital Investment Advisors. That is a lot of vowels.
Yep.
We're both affiliated with Prime Capital Investment Advisors. That is our RIA, based out of Kansas City. Chris and I work together. He doesn't need me on his plans, but he definitely helps me on mine down here along the Gulf Coast. We're going to be back probably in a couple days, and we're going to talk about some things to consider if you are in the process or looking at rolling a 401k. And then we're also going to talk about longevity risk. You all can feel free to message us, Chris or I. If you have questions or want to reach out and talk to us, when you do so, we will have to take that conversation onto the phone or via email, but we'll definitely get back to you. And then, Chris, last thing I want to say, and this is for our wonderful compliance team, and I mean this sincerely. Sometimes when Chris and I get on here and we have to do compliance related statements or whatnot, we tend to, kind of have fun with it. Chris can tell you in his own words what a wonderful compliance department we have. The fact that we're even able to do these live videos is not necessarily the norm in our industry. They're incredibly responsive and realistic, and have been a tremendous important facet of our growth here at Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. So thank you all to the compliance department having to sit here and listen to Chris and I bloviate.
Yeah. Hey, and Josh, before we start, let me go ahead and just read the disclosure from this BlackRock piece, just so we have it on here.
Sure, yeah.
So the source of the chart that I showed everyone is from BlackRock. The graphic looks at the effect of sequence of returns you have on your portfolio over a long period of time. Other factors that may affect the longevity of assets include the investment mix, taxes, expenses related to investing, and the number of years retirement funding and life expectancy. This is a hypothetical illustration. The illustration assumes a hypothetical initial portfolio balance of $1 million, annual withdrawals of $60,000 adjusted annually by 3% for inflation, and hypothetical sequence of returns noted in the table. These figures are for illustrative purposes only and do not represent any particular investment, nor do they reflect any investment fees, expenses, or taxes. When you're withdrawing money from a portfolio, your results can be affected by the sequence of returns, even when average return remains the same, due to the compounding effect of the annual account balances and annual account withdrawals.
You know what that all screams? That screams talk to your advisor.
Yep.
So
exactly. It's really, we just wanted to show you the illustrative perspective of what does it mean if you start out with down years versus start out with up years. And it means a big difference if you don't have that risk mitigated and you're not talking to an advisor to have a strategy in place for it. So
very well said, my friend. All right. I will see you again. And thank you all for joining us.
Thanks.